The Amazing Adventures of Zippi the Zebra. Written by William Manganaro, illustrated by Thomas Taylor. Chapter 1. Africa. This is a story about the greatest racing horse the world had ever known. Only this horse wasn't a horse at all. He was a zebra. His name was Zippi. Our story begins in a beautiful land in a country called Kenya on the continent of Africa. It was in this land that Zippi was born. Zippi's father was very fast, and his mother was even faster. So you can see it was no surprise that Zippi loved to run, and he loved to run fast. Zippi's mother and Zippi's father loved Zippi very much. They would watch him play during the day and watch him sleep during the night. Because Zippi was loved so dearly, and because he loved to run all the day long, Zippi grew strong. Zippi soon became the fastest of all the zebras. He could outrun hyenas. He could outrun lions. He was quicker than the quickest gazelle. He could even keep up with Charlie the cheetah. Charlie was known throughout Africa because he was so fast. All of the animals thought Charlie was the fastest animal they had ever seen. But as Zippi grew, he soon became even faster than Charlie. One day, some men came to Zippi's home. They were men from England, men from the zoo in London. The men were looking for a new zebra for their zoo. They noticed Zippi straight away. "Look at that one," they said. "He's fast," they exclaimed. "Very fast indeed." They decided that Zippi would make a wonderful addition to their zoo. The men had large nets with them. The nets were used to catch animals. They tried to catch Zippi with the nets. Zippi thought they were playing a game with him. He would let them come close and then dodge the net just when they threw it. Zippi was having a grand time with the men. He was really enjoying himself. The men were amazed at Zippi's speed. "We may have to use the tranquilizer on this fellow," said one of the men. "Right-o," said the other. The men went to their safari truck and brought out a gun with a tranquilizer dart. When the animals saw the gun, they ran away as fast as they could. All of them except for Zippi. He was having too much fun with the men to even think about running away. His mother called out to him, "Zippi, come here this minute." His father said, "Son, listen to your mother." All right, I'm coming," said Zippi. As Zippi turned to trot back to his parents, the men shot the dart at Zippi. He felt a small pinch on his bottom and jumped in the air. Suddenly, he felt very sleepy. He wanted to lie down, and so he did. When Zippi woke, he found himself in a cage. He had a bowl of water and some fresh hay in front of his nose. He tried to stand up, but he couldn't. He called out to his mother and to his father. They didn't answer him. Zippi began to cry. He cried and cried and cried. Chapter 2. England. After quite some time, and too many tears to ever count, it began to get dark. Some sort of strange machine picked up Zippi's cage and moved it through the darkness. Once the machine had set him down, Zippi could sense a strange movement underneath him. Zippi made himself a bed out of straw and had a drink of water and tried to go to sleep. Zippi could sense other animals in the same room. Then he heard something. Someone whispered his name. "Zippi." "Yes," cried Zippi. "Yes, it's me." "Zippi, it's Charlie. Charlie the cheetah." "Oh, hello, Charlie. I am so glad I am not alone." "Don't be afraid, Zippi. I will watch over you." "Thank you, Charlie," said Zippi. "Don't mention it, my friend. Now, let me tell you what happened and where we are going. You see, we are on a boat, and it's headed toward a place called England." And so it was that Charlie proceeded to explain the situation to Zippi. It seemed that they would have an awfully nice place to stay when they arrived at the zoo. a place with plenty of food and water and games to play. Charlie explained that someday Zippi might see his family again. For now, Zippi would have to accept that his mother and his father were very far away, and there was nothing he or Charlie could do to change that. Zippi was very sad to have been taken from his parents, but he was thankful to have Charlie with him. Despite his sadness, he was curious to see what adventures were in store for himself and Charlie the cheetah. After what seemed a whole lifetime, the boat finally came into its port. Zippi heard a loud whistle, and he felt the boat stop. "We're here, Zippi," said Charlie. "We are?" "Yes, we are. Stay close to me if you can." The boat was unloaded. The animals of Africa were taken to the zoo in London. Zippi was led to his enclosure. It had a small hill in the middle of it. From the hill, he could see the entire zoo and all of London. Chapter 3. The Zoo. And so it was that Zippi had come to England. He was fortunate to live right next to the cheetah cage, where Charlie could keep an eye on him. He also made friends with all of the other zebras and many of the animals at the zoo. And, as it goes in life, time went by quickly. Before he knew it, 2 years had passed. Zippi was now 3 years old. Zippi's friendship with Charlie continued to thrive. They had become best friends. "Charlie, is that a new zoo for horses?" "No, Zippi, that's not a zoo. It's the new racetrack." "A racetrack?" "Yes, a racetrack. The horses run as fast as they can against each other. The winners of the races get flowers to wear about their necks." "Can zebras race?" "Zebras? No, Zippi. Zebras don't race on the track. It's only for horses." "Oh," said Zippi. "I see." Zippi walked away feeling quite sad. He wondered why he couldn't run on the track with the horses. He was sure he was just as fast. If he could just get on the track, he could show everyone. Then they would see just how fast he could run. "Wait 1 minute," thought Zippi. "People come to watch us at the zoo every day. I have enough room on the edge of my enclosure to run just as if I am on a racetrack." "I'll make my own racetrack," shouted Zippi. "You'll what?" asked Charlie. "I'll make my own track, you'll see." And so, Zippi began to trot around the perimeter of his enclosure. Zippi trampled down the grass to make his very own racetrack. That night before bed, he imagined all of the races he'd have. When he finally fell asleep, he dreamed of all of the people who would see him run and marvel at his speed. Soon, Zippi had made quite a lovely track. He would race against all of the other zebras. None were as fast, and so Zippi would often give them a head start. And sure enough, people saw just how fast Zippi was. Before a month was out, people all around London had heard of Zippi and his racetrack at the zoo. Even the men at the horse track began to hear about Zippi. To satisfy their curiosity, a few of the horse trainers went to the zoo to watch Zippi. They were impressed. "Look at that gallop," said one. "He's incredibly fast," said another. "We've got to get him to the track," said the third man. "Yes, we've got to get him to the track," they all said together. Now Charlie had heard the men talking, and he was worried for Zippi. He knew Zippi would want to run against the horses if he got the chance. He also knew the men didn't really care about Zippi. They cared about money. So Charlie went to Zippi, and he warned him. He told him that the men from the track had seen him. He told him that they would most certainly come for him. He said they would take him to the track and race him against the horses. Charlie told Zippi to be very careful. Zippi listened to Charlie, and he understood what he was told. But, as is often the case with youth, Zippi was overconfident. Zippi couldn't imagine anything bad happening to himself. He only wanted to run out on that great racetrack. That night, the young zebra from Kenya dreamed of his parents, and he dreamed of running free in Africa. He had forgotten what it was really like to run, to really race. He felt that again in his dream. When he woke, he knew that his dream would soon become reality. There he is. That's him? That's him, all right. He looks fast just lying there. Well, let's get him all right, said the first man. Right, said the other. Righto, said the next. And so, the men from the track had come to buy Zippi from the zoo. They woke Zippi, and they paid the zoo for their new racing horse. The men walked Zippi out to the horse carriage. As Zippi walked into it, he sensed his old friend Charlie. He turned to see Charlie waving to him. Be careful, Zippi. I'll always remember you, cried Charlie. I'll miss you, Charlie. Thank you for your friendship and for watching over me. I'll never forget you, cried Zippi. And just as they had finished their goodbyes, the men from the track closed the horse carriage door and drove away. Chapter 4. The Racetrack. He's a zebra! He can't race here! This is a track for horses! Zebras and horses are not the same. You do see the stripes, boys, don't you? Mr. Edwards, please give us a chance, said one of the men. Yeah, Mr. Edwards, just watch him run before you kick us out, said another. Mr. Edwards thought for a moment and looked at Zippi. Zippi smiled shyly at Mr. Edwards. All right, I'll watch him, but he better be amazing, or you are all finished at this track, understand? The men all nodded and then smiled at each other. They brought Zippi out to the main area on the track. Mr. Edwards pulled out his stopwatch. Saddle him up, boys, and put blue on him. Zippi had never run with a saddle or a rider. He had watched the track from the zoo for so long that he instinctively took to being ridden. Blue was the best jockey in all of London and maybe the entire world. He immediately took to Zippi. Blue and Zippi could tell right away they were going to be very good friends. Good friends indeed. Zippi trotted to the starting line. He knew this was an important moment. His hooves felt the sandy track beneath him, and he felt alive. Blue could feel him tense, and he whispered in Zippi's ear, Show me what you can do. Zippi took off like a shot. When they crossed the finish line, Mr. Edwards checked his watch. He shook his head, and he checked his watch one more time. Zippi had run faster than any horse had ever run before. Mr. Edwards couldn't believe what he had just seen. He began to laugh, and he jumped in the air and clicked his heels together. Mr. Edwards ran to his handlers, and he hugged them. You boys have found a gold mine. Blue trotted Zippi back to the barn. He gave Zippi a great big hug. He knew he had a special horse. Excuse me, a special zebra. Yes, indeed, he had quite a special zebra. Now, Mr. Edwards was a smart man. He knew that the other owners would never stand for a zebra racing against their horses. He had an idea to work around Zippi looking different than the horses. And so that very night, Mr. Edwards had his men paint Zippi pure black. A full moon was shining, and when they finished, Zippi looked like a gleaming, midnight black stallion. No one could have guessed he was a zebra. You missed a spot. Where? On his neck. Oh, righto, I see it, thanks. And so, Zippi the zebra from Africa was able to race against the thoroughbreds at the racetrack in London. Chapter 5. Zippi Zoo. Let's enter him in the fourth race, boys. It's only 5.5 furlongs, and with his speed, he'll win for sure. Are you going to bet on him, Mr. Edwards? Boys. Do Englishmen drink tea? Of course I'm going to bet on him. There's no way he can lose. If you're smart, you'll do the same. So Mr. Edwards and his men bet all of the money they had on Zippi to win the fourth race. He raced under the name of Zippi Zoo. And just as Mr. Edwards thought, Blue took Zippi around the track in record time. Blue and Zippi made a great deal of money for Mr. Edwards and his men that day, and the next day too. 3 days later, they entered Zippi into his biggest race yet. Zippi had only raced twice, but he was the favorite as he had broken the track record in each of his races. People from all over London had heard of him and had come out to watch the great black stallion. The boys had put a fresh coat of paint on him the night before, and he looked splendid. Blue guided Zippi into the starting gate, and the bell rang, and Zippi took off. Zippi was leading comfortably halfway through the race. Suddenly, as it will from time to time in London, it began to rain. As the spectators cheered Zippi on toward the finish, something strange happened. It looked to all who were watching that Zippi was running so fast that he was running out of his fur coat. The rain had begun to wash off the black paint. As Zippi crossed the line in first place, a great roar erupted from the crowd. It quickly turned to a chorus of boos. The people in the stands had realized that Zippi wasn't a horse at all. Before them stood a zebra. The men from the track couldn't believe what they saw, and they knew that the spectators would be very upset because now the race would not count and they would lose the money they thought they had won. Mr. Edwards and his men hopped into a big black car. They raced away past Zippi and Blue and the angry crowd. Zippi and Blue were left standing there. The angry mob of people began to surround them. They were very scared. The people were so mad that there was no telling what they might do. Zippi thought of Charlie's warning to him. He remembered how Charlie explained that the men only cared about money. He could see that now. As the crowd grew closer, Zippi felt he might cry, and he wished he had listened to Charlie. Suddenly, the crowd jumped back. A ball of fur and claws whirled in front of Zippi and Blue, keeping the mob away from them. It was Charlie. He had seen all of the commotion from the zoo and leapt out of his enclosure. He growled at the hostile crowd, then turned and called for Zippi and Blue to follow him. They ran away as fast as they could. Chapter 6. Home. The crowd chased after them, but they were no match for the speed of Zippi and Charlie. Blue hung on tight, and they ran and ran and ran. Zippi felt like he did as a youngster. He was running beside Charlie again. Soon they were at the boat docks. This was the same area they had arrived at over 3 years ago. Blue guided Zippi toward an abandoned-looking vessel. Charlie leapt from the dock and landed on the deck of the boat. Blue and Zippi followed. "Let's hide in here until things die down a bit," said Charlie, pointing below deck. "Good idea," said Blue. "I'm tired," said Zippi. So they all went below deck, and having spent so much energy, they fell easily into a deep sleep. A few hours later, they awoke to the sounds of people talking. Zippi was afraid it was the mob of people from the track. Blue held up his finger and shushed Zippi to remain quiet. They were still and listened to the men talking. "We're moving," whispered Charlie. They heard the captain of the ship say that the ship would be sailing for 6 days. He said that they would be going to a place called Morocco. They were on a trading ship. The men on the ship were trading gold for spices. "Where is Morocco?" asked Zippi in his quietest voice. "It's in Africa," said Blue. "Africa," thought Zippi and Charlie. They were going home. Charlie and Zippi looked at each other in amazement. Zippi would see his family again. He was so excited that he could barely contain himself. Blue could sense his excitement, and he tried to settle him. Blue reminded Zippi that there was plenty of danger ahead. If the men on the ship found them, they might throw them all overboard. They also had nothing to eat. They would have to be careful and try to sneak some food during the night. If they did make it to Morocco, they would still have to travel thousands of miles to get to Kenya. Yes, there was plenty of danger ahead. Zippi heard Blue, and he understood. But he couldn't help but feel wonderful. He and Charlie had had quite an adventure since they left Africa. He was sure they would have even greater adventures ahead. He had raced the fastest horses in the world, and he had won. He was safe for now, and he was headed for his home and his parents. He lay his head next to Charlie's, and soon he was dreaming of Africa.